It starts not with silence, but with a storm. The screen splits. On one side, Alex Jones leans forward, red-faced, pounding his desk, his voice a heavy thrum of accusation and noise. He's in full command, or so it seems, rolling over every syllable with the confidence of a man used to controlling the room. But then, a voice cuts through. Not loud, not rushed, but deliberate. Jasmine Crockett, hands folded, gaze steady, interrupts without raising her tone. "Alex, that's not true, and you know it." There's a pause. A visible ripple of surprise crosses the faces of the host panel. Even the camera seems to hesitate. Jones blinks, caught off guard. It's subtle, but unmistakable. The first crack in his armor. He tries again, louder this time, stacking phrases like bricks, hoping to wall her out. But she doesn't flinch. "You're used to shouting people down," she says evenly. "But shouting doesn't make something real." The words are measured, each one landing with weight. The audience, both in studio and online, feels the shift instantly. The tempo has changed. Now Jones is leaning even closer, papers rattling, voice rising to a near shout. But Crockett doesn't mirror his energy. She refuses the bait. She waits, letting the noise burn itself out, then speaks again, almost softly, as if the calmness is the point. "If you believe your own words, Alex, why do you fear mine?" That's when it happens, the moment of realization. His voice drops for half a second, searching for footing, the bluster momentarily thinning. Viewers catch it, social media clips will freeze it later. This is not the usual rhythm of an Alex Jones broadcast. This is something else. The camera catches the faintest smile at the edge of Crockett's face, not smug, but certain. She knows she's not there to compete in volume. She's there to compete in truth. And as Jones shuffles his papers, his voice now clipped, Crockett leans slightly closer to the mic and delivers the line that will echo long after the broadcast ends. "The facts will always be louder than the noise." To understand why this moment hit so hard, let's rewind. The power of live media is simple. There's no edit button. Words hang in the air, and once they leave your mouth, they belong to the audience. This segment was supposed to be like any other, an interview with a controversial commentator, some sparring, some sound bites. But that night, the equation changed. Misinformation wasn't just questioned, it was confronted. And that's why it mattered. Alex Jones had spent years perfecting his brand of communication. Rapid, forceful, relentless. He'd turned talk radio into a spectacle, building an audience that expected noise, conflict, and certainty at any cost. To many, his word was entertainment. To others, it was dangerous influence. And here he was, live, ready to steamroll another guest. The producers didn't expect much resistance. The audience certainly didn't. Enter Jasmine Crockett, a quiet but firm presence. Her reputation was clear: attorney, legislator, advocate for those often left unheard. But this wasn't her usual stage. She wasn't in a courtroom or committee hearing. She was stepping into a world built for interruptions and volume. The expectation was that she would be outgunned. What no one predicted was that she didn't. Come to match his speed. She came to stop it. That's why this clash matters. It's not just about one broadcaster or one politician. It's about the tension between truth and theater, between facts and noise. Millions have grown weary of being shouted at. In that moment, Crockett became the voice for those who have felt drowned out, silenced, or ignored. She didn't have to fight for airtime. She claimed it calmly. And that calmness was more than style. It was strategy. Before the cameras even rolled, she'd done her work. She knew his arguments, his patterns, even the pressure points that often went unnoticed. Jones didn't see it coming. To him, she was just another guest. But to her, this was a chance to make a point that couldn't be erased. Preparation always beats chaos. The stakes were clear. A single live segment could define how millions viewed both figures. Was this about entertainment or accountability? Could truth stand firm without shouting? Crockett seemed determined to prove it could. By the time Jones leaned into his microphone, ready to do what he'd always done, Crockett was already a step ahead. She wasn't looking for a fight. She was building a case. And in that quiet confidence was something powerful. The promise that facts, when wielded with precision, can stop even the loudest voices. First, let's look at the man who's built a career on chaos. To understand the weight of that moment, you have to know the man at the center of it. Alex Jones isn't just another media personality. He's a brand, a storm, a voice that built its power on speed, volume, and certainty. For decades, he has thrived on being louder, faster, and more relentless than anyone else in the room. His style is unmistakable. Words delivered like a machine gun, thoughts layered so quickly that opponents often struggle to keep up. He doesn't wait for questions. He doesn't pause for reflection. In his world, dominance comes from pace, and the conversation is a battlefield he intends to control. That approach has made him famous, infamous, and everything in between. To his supporters, he's a truth-teller unafraid to challenge the mainstream. To his critics, he's a provocateur whose words have sometimes gone too far. Over the years, his shows have touched headlines and lawsuits, bringing both attention and controversy. He's been called fearless, reckless, and sometimes dangerous, but never timid. The secret to his power isn't just his voice, but his ability to set the tempo. When Alex Jones speaks, he overwhelms. He knows that if he can keep talking, keep moving, keep his opponents reacting rather than thinking, he wins. That strategy works because most people aren't ready for it. Guests expect a debate, not a flood. Viewers expect heat, not precision. And Jones has mastered that performance. The raised voice, the stack of papers, the half-smile that says he's daring you to keep up. It's theater, but it's theater. That's kept him relevant. He knows how to make a conversation feel urgent, even when the content is questionable. For him, speed is a shield. The faster he goes, the harder it is to pin him down. But there's another side to this. Speed and volume aren't invincibility, they're tactics. They work because people hesitate, because silence feels like defeat. But what happens when someone doesn't hesitate? What happens when the noise meets a wall of calm? That's the vulnerability few see. For all his bluster, Jones is most comfortable when he's moving forward, when he's dictating the pace. The moments that unsettle him are the ones where he's forced to stop, to answer, to slow down. This is why the Crockett clash mattered. It wasn't just another heated exchange, it was a direct challenge to his rhythm. And rhythm is everything to a broadcaster like Jones. Without it, the armor of confidence can slip. Without the rapid fire, the loudness loses its edge. For a man who's built a career on momentum, being made to pause can feel like being pinned. In this story, that's where the tension builds. Jones came into that segment expecting another familiar dance. He talks, they react, the clock runs out, and he leaves with the last word. What he didn't expect was a guest who wouldn't play the game, who came prepared not to shout but to anchor. She didn't try to match his energy, she disrupted it. And when you strip away the speed, the noise, the theater, you find something else, a man who, like anyone, has limits. It's not about whether he's wrong or right in that moment. It's about something more subtle, more human. A personality built on control feels pressure when that control is challenged. And for Alex Jones, that challenge didn't come with anger or chaos. It came with composure. That's the contrast. That made the broadcast electric. Because when a man who thrives on chaos meets someone who thrives on order, something rare happens. The noise gets quiet enough for everyone to listen. But what happens when control slips? Before she was the calm voice that stopped a storm, Jasmine Crockett was someone who had learned to make herself heard in rooms where no one expected her to speak. Her story doesn't begin with headlines. It begins with work. Long, quiet, deliberate. Work that built a reputation one case at a time. An attorney by training, she cut her teeth in spaces where preparation wasn't optional and mistakes carried consequences. Her clients weren't the powerful or the privileged. Often, they were the people with the least protection and the most to lose. In those courtrooms, Crockett learned that the loudest person wasn't the one who won. It was the one with the clearest facts. That skill would become her signature. She didn't waste words, she didn't bluff, and she didn't confuse volume with conviction. When she spoke, it was with purpose. When she listened, it was with intent. By the time she entered politics, those habits had become part of her DNA. Whether on the House floor or in committee hearings, she carried the same rhythm. Hear everything, miss nothing, and when it's time to talk, make each sentence count. People noticed. Her questioning style earned headlines not because she shouted, but because she sliced through the noise. Her colleagues learned quickly that when Crockett leaned into her microphone, it meant the room was about to shift. She wasn't known for grandstanding. She was known for precision. In a political world that often rewards spectacle, that was its own quiet power. But behind that composure was something else, something that mattered just as much, an instinct for fairness. Crockett's path was built on the idea that representation mattered, that voices long ignored could be amplified if you carried yourself with discipline and skill. For many in immigrant communities, for people who felt their identities reduced to talking points, her presence was a signal. You could be unapologetically yourself and still hold your ground. That's why this live segment carried a different weight for her. It wasn't just an interview, it was an opportunity to show that facts could survive the storm. She knew who she was up against. She had studied the patterns, understood the tactics. Alex Jones liked speed, liked to dominate, liked to turn conversation into a performance. Crockett liked the opposite: stillness, preparation, and timing. Those instincts weren't born overnight. They came from years of having to defend every word, from experiences where her credibility was often questioned before she even spoke. She knew what it meant to walk into rooms where people underestimated her. In fact, she had built a career on that. Underestimation became an advantage. It gave her the space to be sharper than expected, calmer than predicted, and more prepared than anyone assumed. And that's the quiet thread running through her career: control. Not control over others, but control over herself. The more chaotic the situation, the more focused she became. So when she agreed to join a live broadcast with a man known for creating chaos, she didn't prepare to match his energy. She prepared to neutralize it. Her notes were ready, her facts were organized, and her strategy was simple. Let him create the noise, and then cut through it when the moment was right. This wasn't about winning an argument for its own sake. For Crockett, it was always about something larger: accountability. Misinformation wasn't just bad politics, it was dangerous. And if there was ever a moment to show that a calm, fact-driven voice could stand up to a tidal wave of words, this was it. So when she walked into that studio, she carried more than her briefcase. She carried years of training, a belief in the value of truth, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew that you don't have to be loud to be heard. She didn't need to trade insults or raise her tone. She didn't even need to win the room. All she needed was the right moment, and when it came, she'd be ready. She came ready to defend facts, not chase drama. The cameras were already rolling when the two took their seats. On one side, Alex Jones was in his element, his chair, barely containing the restless energy of a man who thrives on speed. He came out swinging, his words like rapid bursts, claims, accusations, tangents stacked one on top of another. He interrupted himself, cut off questions before they finished, and filled every second with sound. It was the style that made him famous, take control, overwhelmed the space and keep moving so fast no one can pin you down. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush to meet him there. She sat forward but still, her hands folded lightly on the desk, eyes on Jones as though studying a case file. Every few moments she would nod slightly, a silent acknowledgement that she heard every word. It was deliberate. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline. The more he filled the air, the more she let the audience feel the contrast between noise and focus. Jones seized on the silence as an opening. He raised his volume, dropped his voice, gestured widely, almost daring her to jump in. He accused, joked, jabbed. Each time, Crockett waited. And then, when a claim came that demanded an answer, she leaned into the microphone and said just a few words. Clear, concise, unshaken. The effect was instant. The pace shifted. Jones interrupted, but this time she didn't yield. She didn't match his speed, but she didn't retreat either. Her answers were short enough to keep his attention but sharp enough to make the room listen. The moderators glanced between them, sensing something different. Jones was louder, but Crockett was starting to own the moments that mattered. With each exchange, the pattern repeated. Jones would push harder, talk faster. Crockett would wait, let him finish, or sometimes just let the words hang, and then deliver a sentence that undercut the noise. It wasn't a clash of volume, it was a clash of tempo, and the tension grew. Viewers could feel it, the relentless talker meeting the immovable listener. Jones's interruptions became more frequent, his tone more clipped, as if the calmness in front of him was starting to irritate. Meanwhile, Crockett never raised her voice, never shifted in her chair. She spoke as though she had all the time in the world. Then, just when it seemed Jones had regained the floor completely, she reached for a document, unfolded it slowly, and said, "You've said a lot tonight, but here's what's actually in the record." The room stilled. Jones leaned forward. The moderators leaned closer. And for the first time, it wasn't his voice that carried the moment. It was hers. Then the conversation turned, and so did the tone. She waited until the noise reached its peak. Jones was leaning forward, voice rising again, another torrent of claims spilling fast enough to blur. And then, without raising her voice, Crockett moved. She reached for a folder that had been sitting untouched at her side, placed it gently on the desk, and opened it with the calmness of someone who knew exactly what was inside. "Alex," she said evenly, "you've made several claims tonight. Let's take them one at a time." It was the kind of sentence that sounds simple until you hear the weight behind it. The rhythm changed instantly. The audience sensed it. The host panel stopped shifting in their chairs. Even Jones's voice dipped for a moment, as if he hadn't expected her to bring anything more than words. She pulled out the first page. "You said earlier that these reports were fabricated. Here's the source. Government records, filed publicly, reviewed by independent analysts." Her tone was clear, not rushed, not smug, just factual. The camera caught Jones glancing toward the papers, then back to her. He opened his mouth, but she was already on to the next point. "This claim about funding? False. The breakdown is here, line by line. Anyone can read it." She slid another page forward. Jones tried to interrupt, but the interruptions were different now. They weren't rolling over her. They were breaking against something solid. She didn't raise her voice. She simply kept talking. "You've said these events never happened. Yet here's the footage. Here are the names. Here's the timeline. We don't have to guess." Each sentence landed like a quiet gavel. There was no theatrics, no grand gestures. Just an attorney, doing what attorneys do, walking through evidence, calmly and relentlessly. The louder he got, the steadier she became. The viewers could see it. The energy was shifting, the spotlight moving. On social media, clips started appearing almost instantly. People were posting short videos of her holding up documents, of Jones leaning back, lips pressed, eyes darting. Captions popped up. She came prepared. Facts, noise. The reaction was subtle but real. When an audience starts quoting your lines before you finish speaking, you know something has shifted. By the third point, Jones's interruptions had slowed. He was still speaking, still challenging, but the rhythm was gone. He was on defense, trying to poke holes rather than lead. Crockett didn't give him the pause he wanted. She kept the pace calm, methodical. If you believe these numbers are wrong, you can challenge them. But they're not mine. They're public record. That sentence hung in the air. Public record. The phrase implied something larger than two people at a desk. It implied accountability, something outside their argument. It was no longer just his word against hers. The segment's tension peaked when she read back one of his own statements, word for word, and then laid the evidence beside it. You said this was fabricated. Here is the document you cited, unaltered. Your own source contradicts you. The panel stayed quiet. Jones shifted in his seat, blinked, tried a counter. But the volume was lower now, the edges softer. He had, been met with something he wasn't expecting, someone who didn't play his game. And then came the line. She looked directly into the camera, not at him, not at the papers, but straight to the viewers. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone willing to hold it up. That was the moment. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't a takedown in the theatrical sense. It was measured, deliberate, and final. The kind of sentence that stays with people long after the broadcast fades. Jones tried to recover, but the balance was gone. Every word after that felt like follow-up, not command. The camera caught the smallest details. The way he glanced down more often, the way his interruptions sounded more like questions than declarations. The conversation wasn't over, but something fundamental had changed. Viewers could feel it. Even those who didn't agree with her could see it. The tone had shifted. The energy belonged to her now. And as the segment moved forward, Crockett closed her folder, leaving the papers on the desk like a quiet challenge. "That's just the first part," she said. The audience leaned in. The conversation wasn't done yet, but the ground under it had moved. The moment the segment ended, the echo began. Even before the credits rolled, snippets of Crockett's calm responses were already making their way to timelines and group chats. Someone clipped the line, "The truth doesn't need to shout," and by the time the host signed off, it had been replayed thousands of times. It wasn't just that she had fact-checked Jones, it was the way she had done it. Steady, composed, in control. Within an hour, political commentators were dissecting the exchange. Some framed it as a turning point, proof that composure could win even in chaotic spaces. Others marveled at the strategy. She didn't match his energy, she neutralized it. On one progressive news stream, a panelist leaned back and said, half smiling, "That's how you handle a storm. You don't fight the wind, you let it burn itself out." But the bigger wave was online. Twitter threads broke down each moment, turning her calm interruptions into shareable quotes. Instagram Reels zoomed in on Jones's expressions as he realized he was being cornered by facts. TikTok edits layered soft music over Crockett's final line, treating it like a punchline and a rallying cry all at once. Hashtags started forming. Facts win. You stay calm. You, Crockett, Evie's chaos. And it wasn't just supporters talking. Journalists who often covered these debates in neutral tones began noting the difference. One headline read, "Preparedness beats performance." Another, "Crockett turns up the volume on truth," without raising her voice. It became less about politics and more about craft. How to stay collected when someone tries to spin the room out of control. Public perception followed. Viewers praised the restraint. They admired the preparation, the refusal to be dragged into a shouting match. It felt refreshing to many who were tired of noise-dominating discourse. In comment sections, immigrants and first-generation Americans spoke about how they saw themselves in that calmness, someone proving that you could hold your identity proudly and still win the moment without yelling. Parents shared clips with captions like, "This is how you debate." And Jones? The reviews weren't kind. Even some who supported his politics noted the cracks. "He seemed rattled," one viewer wrote, "too used to controlling the room." Others were harsher, saying his pace felt frantic once Crockett slowed it down. A few of his defenders claimed the questions were unfair, but the momentum wasn't theirs to control anymore. The focus had shifted. It wasn't just a single night's entertainment. It was a story about tone, preparation, and credibility. The Internet, unpredictable as it is, had chosen a side, not because of ideology alone, but because of style. Loudness was familiar. Calmness was magnetic. By the next morning, clips of the debate were featured on morning shows. A producer called it the segment everyone's talking about. And there, in bold on a trending list, was Crockett's name. The moment had passed on air, but its ripples were still spreading. The argument was over, but the conversation was only beginning. And Crockett, she didn't pause to celebrate. She knew what came next. The night wasn't just about winning an exchange, it was about what you do with the echo. Because the room may have gone quiet, but the country was still listening. When the dust settled, there was no roar of victory, no gloating soundbite, no triumphant fist pump. Crockett simply walked away from the set with the same steady energy she had carried onto it. That was the point. She wasn't there to create chaos. She was there to clarify. And that quiet clarity, in a space built to reward noise, was what people remembered. The lesson wasn't hidden. It was in every pause she allowed, every word she chose with care. In a time when volume often substitutes for truth, when conversations are hijacked by whoever speaks the fastest or the loudest, Crockett's performance was proof that composure is not weakness. It's a weapon. She didn't outshout Alex Jones. She outlasted him. She let the facts breathe, and they spoke for themselves. That's why the moment traveled so far. Viewers didn't need to agree with her politics to appreciate the discipline. There was something universal about watching a person hold their ground without raising their voice. It reminded people of arguments at family dinners, workplace conflicts, or moments when they, too, wished they had stayed calm instead of snapping back. The story became bigger than a political clash. It became a model. Because here's the truth, information is everywhere, but trust is rare. And trust isn't earned by who can dominate the microphone. It's earned by who can stand still when the noise rises, who can let the other side finish and still keep their balance. Crockett's strength came from preparation, yes, but more than that, it came from belief. That facts matter, that discipline matters, that you can win without yelling. For an audience tired of chaos, that mattered. It's why her clips were shared not just as political content but as life advice. Coaches used it as a teaching moment. Parents showed it to kids. Activists pointed to it as proof that you don't have to mimic the tactics of your opposition to make an impact. It was a small but resonant reminder. Dignity doesn't trend often, but when it does, it's unforgettable. The irony, of course, is that in a space designed to reward disruption, Crockett's calm was the most disruptive thing of all. She forced a pause, and in that pause, people leaned in. That's what leadership looks like in a noisy world. So the moral is simple, but it's the kind that stays with you. In an age of noise, composure cuts deeper than shouting. When the world gets loud, the calmest voice is often the one people trust. And for those watching that night, they saw it happen in real time. Not just a debate won, but a principle proven. When chaos met preparation, the result was clear. Alex Jones came armed with noise, but Jasmine Crockett came armed with focus. And in the end, it was the focus that people remembered. This wasn't just about one debate. It was about something bigger. It was about proving that when the volume goes up, truth doesn't have to compete. It just has to stand firm. Moments like these remind us why live TV still matters. It's unscripted, unpredictable, and it shows us who really has control when the spotlight turns hot. Crockett's calm wasn't just a tactic, it was a statement. In an arena that thrives on confrontation, she chose precision. And the world noticed. So, what did you think? Was this the night live TV changed? Did this moment prove that composure can still win in an age of outrage? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us which moment hit hardest for you. Did you find yourself nodding along? Did it surprise you? Or maybe it inspired you to handle your own storms a little differently. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it. Let more people see that there's another way to win, without shouting, without spiraling, just by standing strong. And if you want more moments like this, stories where preparation meets pressure and composure takes the spotlight, make sure to subscribe. Hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. Because this wasn't just a debate, it was a reminder. In a world where noise is everywhere, it's the calm that cuts through.